Welcome to this video on long exposure at sunset. In this scene we have two different areas of motion blur. Both the background where the clouds are moving across the scene and the foreground where we have these tall reeds that are blowing in the wind. They produce very different effects and add to the scene greatly with that gorgeous Sicilian town in that mid-ground. This is going to be a great photo because the sun is just setting and you can see in the waves of the clouds in the background, we've got some orange glow. It's going to come out great. So let's talk about my setup. As usual, I'm using my 24-70, focused manually to infinity. And in this scenario, I've opted for a 6-stop filter. 6 stops allows me to set my aperture to f8, my ISO to 400, and I have a 1.3 second exposure time. I'm going to experiment with some different exposure lengths. 1.3 is quite good because the clouds are moving quite fast, but it might not be long enough. So this is 1.3, and let's adjust that now to 4 seconds. I have to adjust the aperture as well. Let's take it to f16 now. And if I focus in on the clouds, the motion blur is quite greatly exaggerated. Before, it didn't really look like much motion blur, whereas now we've got quite a bit of motion blur, which I quite like. I think 4 seconds is a bit better. For this foreground to work properly, we need some wind. Now, Mother Nature decides what it wants to do and when it wants to do it, so we can't demand wind to happen here. But certainly at a 4 second exposure time, we will start to get more motion than if it was at 1.3 seconds. And we may even increase the shutter speed further. So let's recap settings right now. We're doing 4 seconds, f16, and ISO 400. And let's see how that came out. That's really cool. I want to keep as much detail as I can in the clouds. I'm certainly still seeing the shape because they're really strong clouds. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of clouds in this scene. Actually, only 3 of them are appearing in the frame, but it looks great. And at 4 seconds, I'm getting just the right amount of motion blur in this foreground to blur it and draw your eye into the frame to this beautiful town here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit further now because there's a road that goes past here. And although it is a nice leading line, it's not the most beautiful road in the world. It is just concrete and brick, and it's just not adding to the scene the way I'd like. I'm going to zoom in a bit further and focus more on the clouds, and then that will give us a more focused view of that scene, of that beautiful Sicilian town on the hillside there. Got a nice gust of wind that just came across there, so I managed to get some of these reeds blowing in the wind, and it actually creates a true blur there. You can't really see what it is. All you can see is a soft wave in the bottom right hand side of the frame, and it draws your eye in. Now, I apologize if I'm talking quite fast here, but the adrenaline has hit because we were driving around these roads. I found this awesome little road that I thought, oh, let's go up here, it's going to take us to the town. We got around a couple corners and we only had 2 wheels on the road at one point because they're so tight. And of course, by the time I get around all these corners and up to the top, it doesn't reach the town. So I had to do a 3-point turn and back down again. We ran out of time a bit as we were shooting the sunset, but I think we're here just in time. You can see over here, we're now starting to get that orange glow that you hope to see at sunset. To know exactly where the sun is going to set when there's loads of clouds out, once again, refer back to the app Photo Pills because it will tell you exactly where the sun is, where it's setting, and you'll get the best results when you can predict where the light and the glow is going to come from. Now I'm putting away my 6-stop filter and I'm going to change the lens to my 100mm. The reason for that is the glow is really starting to kick in the background there, and I want to focus on that, and to do that I need to get a bit closer. So out comes the 100 instead of the 70. The great thing about sunsets is you start to have less and less light in your scene, and that means you can put away your filters. So if you don't have them with you, you have the option to still capture awesome sunsets. So in this scene, what I'm able to do is I've set my aperture to f32, which is what my 100mm goes to because it's a macro lens, and that is half as much light as f22. And I'm shooting at 4 seconds still, ISO 100, and I'm still getting long exposures without any filters, and the results are really fantastic. So these clouds are starting to glow bright orange, and with a 4 second motion blur as them passing across the scene, the results really do speak for themselves. With the 100mm, we do have less of this motion in the foreground where these reeds are standing up into the frame. In an ideal world, I probably wouldn't have them at all now, and at 4 seconds, they do tend to disappear in some of the shots. It really does depend on the amount of wind that's coming into the frame though. As I take a photo at 4 seconds and I see the speed at which the clouds are moving across the frame, it does seem to look a little bit slow. We're capturing too much of that movement in the sky. I don't want all of it, I just want some of it. So I've changed the shutter speed now to 2 seconds, and I think the results have improved. We've still got that motion, but it's a little bit more nuanced and detailed. Now I'm going to experiment at 1.3 seconds and f/22. We're starting to lose light. It's been about 5 minutes now of shooting with this lens on. So the amount of light that we're losing in that time is quite significant. And I can experiment with faster shutter speeds than 2 seconds, or I can experiment with slower ones. I'm going for faster in this case because I want to see how it looks, and I'm doing f/22 instead of 32. I'm really glad that I switched to my 100mm here because I'm getting a much closer crop on those really special orange clouds instead of the other ones, which are interesting but really don't compare to that sunset glow that we're looking for when we're capturing a sunset. And before we lose all of the light, I'm going to see what it looks like with a really slow shutter speed. So let's go to 5 seconds now, f/32, ISO 100. It'll be a little bit overexposed, but not too much. That's really cool. I think 5 is just too much, so let's go to 4. Let's do 3.2, because that's going to be around the right exposure. That last shot was a bit overexposed. And that's cool because we're getting the motion blur in the foreground and the background. And in that midground, that subject, that beautiful Sicilian town, is perfectly still and sharp. We're now about 15 minutes before the sun sets, and we're starting to see that glow in all its glorious details. When the sun does set, some of these clouds up here might change colour, so we'll stick around for that. But right now, I think we're starting to get some of the best action. That's a really nice contrast between that dark grey and that bright orange in that background there. And we've got a nice gust of wind in the foreground, so we'll get a bit of blur. This is a 4-second exposure. It turned out great, I love that. Gorgeous. That smooth glow, it's still a little bit too fast, I think. I'm gonna change it to 2 seconds. We'll keep it underexposed. I can bring that back later. Rather underexposed than overexposed. Whoa, okay, that's beautiful. You see the sun is just setting and it's going behind the mountain, and for the next 30 seconds maybe, it's gonna push that light up under the clouds, over the mountain, and illuminate the whole sky orange in just that part of our scene that we're capturing. It is really, really special. And with that range from the blue-grey over there to the orange over there, it's almost as if there's some purple in the middle too. Absolutely stunning. Let's experiment for 1 second exposure as well, just see if that captures some more of that sharp detail. Still capturing the blur, but some of the more finer details will look better at 1 second. I have to adjust my aperture a bit there. I've gone to f/18, ISO 100 still. The sky is just on fire right now, and it is mesmerizing. This for me is a landscape photographer's dream. To be able to get a situation like this comes only once every few months, to get a beautiful sunset in a beautiful location. Like, I feel really lucky to be able to capture this right now. 1 second works quite nicely there. I'll experiment again with 2 seconds. So clouds are slowing down a little bit, I've noticed. This is 2 seconds and f/29, ISO 100. That was bringing a bit more detail of the sky over there, where it was getting a bit overexposed in places. And once again, that blue and orange from the sky, that blue-grey orange, is producing what combines to be actually a purple in some parts of those clouds. And let's try a 4 second. I love experimenting with shutter speeds as I shoot because you can get some really remarkable shots. Depends on the weather, depends on the speed. You can see we're getting less and less now of these clouds, so a long exposure here will probably do really well. Let me go to 8 seconds on that, because we're just getting those finer details, those fluffy orange bits. Yeah, now we're starting to see some really nice stuff here. Now, this is going to overexpose it a little bit because I'm going to do 13 seconds, f/32, ISO 100. Hopefully this camera is not moving too much on the tripod. That's where we're going to get those last long wisps. And it's like a paintbrush, it's dragged across the sky. 13's a bit long. Let's go back to 8 seconds there. You can see just moments between those two photos, we've lost light. And this will probably be one of the last shots because the sun has now dipped. Well, not quite dipped behind the horizon, but it will in a couple minutes. There's mountains in the distance. There's Etna in the distance, actually, which is why it's probably ducked behind one of those. And there we have it. The sun has now all but disappeared, and we've got just those faint remnants of orange on those clouds. The photographs we've taken here are just fantastic. I've been so pleased with this situation. You know, it's not often that you manage to get a beautiful location, perfect weather, great clouds, great colour. So for me in this situation, considering we were just driving from a bar from the scene in The Godfather, to be able to find a scene like this, it's really, really fulfilling. It's why we do it, and I hope you've enjoyed this process. If you have any questions, please go ahead and leave me a comment. I'll be happy to get back to you. I really enjoyed making this video, and I hope that you've enjoyed watching it. Thanks for watching.